It's now 4:30, and I'm going to call the September 22nd, 2015 meeting of the Moorhead Public Service Commission to order. Could I have a motion, gentlemen, concerning the agenda?
Move approval of the agenda as distributed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Could I have a similar motion concerning the consent agenda?
I move approval of the consent agenda.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. That motion carries. Any customers to be heard or recognitions, Bill?
No, sir.
Any old business, Bill?
Nope.
Members of the City Council, Chuck, what have you done to us lately?
Excuse me?
Yeah. What have you got to report, Chuck?
Not much. We just, this coming when we have the tax levy approval and the budget approval, so we're kind of studying the budget and that. But other than that, that's about it.
Okay,
Everything's real smooth right now.
good. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Hendrickson? Okay. Members of the Public Service Commission, do we have anything to report amongst our group? David?
I would report that Councilmember Hendrickson and Councilmember Durand and members of our staff and members of city staff and Ralph and I met last week to just do what is a required review of our transfer agreement. No fireworks, actually nothing of real significance because it came in just exactly as our agreement really thought it would. So there were no surprises monetarily or as far as elements of the agreement. So it was actually a pleasant lunch, a good conversation. Went through the numbers very, very quickly, and I think both sides are satisfied.
That's wonderful.
We're living according to the agreement.
I will renew the thanks to the gang of 4/5, and it's obvious that work paid off.
It's September, and we're done, as opposed to early December and still hashing over, minutia. So it's really, so far.
That's wonderful news. Good. Anybody else have anything to report? Les, did you have something?
I had a quick one.
Ralph, do you have something to report?
I do. We had a meeting of the Lake Agassiz Water Authority last week, and that's actually looks like the pipe is picking up steam. Not making it a steam pipe, I guess, but
I was going to ask about that.
yeah, I know. Sorry. So we had a good meeting, and I think again, as we discussed before, and at some point we will have to make a decision whether we are in or out. There's, I think, a next step from the associations to actually look around and see who is in and out. There may be others who may want to come in, others who may want to leave. So we have to make a decision at some point. We have the next meeting in a month, right, Chris? Tentatively in a month. So we're going from every 6 months to every month, which is an indication as well that things are getting a little bit more speed. The price tag still is estimated at $1 billion and basically would pipe water from north of Bismarck out of Missouri, across North Dakota, and then either into the Bald Creek or right into Lake Stabula, and then get it down into this area. So again, that's the plan right now. Lots of moving parts, lots of unknowns, but there's going to be more and more questions asked as to get the details. One of the big unknowns is the operating cost. So we think we know the cost will be about $1 billion to actually build the thing, but it's not quite clear how much it will actually cost to maintain it. So we'll give an update in a month, but just want to, again, keep it on the agenda that it is something that we'll have to decide on, because the next step will be request for more money. The public share right now, the local share of the $1 billion would be about $100 million, and we would have about 5% of that, I guess, on the building cost. Again, the operating cost, we don't know yet.
Okay. David?
Ralph, this may be really premature, but in the conversations about whether we are going to participate or not, would there be an expectation that we would stop drawing from the river if they got to a point where they started, or where they needed to bring water from the Missouri? Would the expectation be that we then discontinue drawing from the river and go to our other source, so that we're not encroaching on what it is that they've invested in?
And Chris, correct me, but the water would never make it to our intake, correct? Because it goes into the Cheyenne, so a city
Direct
of
into the
Fargo
power plant.
would pull it out of the Cheyenne, and it would actually never make it into our south of our intake. So
Okay.
the assumption would be that the river has run, or is not running anymore.
Okay.
We're drawing it down, and once that water's gone, we would have to switch over. That's one of our concerns, is that in addition to the participating in the building cost to get the water into the Cheyenne, we also would have to have a pipeline from somewhere in Fargo, and maybe it's attached to the water plant, who knows? Maybe it's all the way to Cheyenne to actually get the water from that spot over here,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So the water that would naturally never flow to our intake, we would have to find an alternative intake into our system. Am I right, Chris? Wow.
Wouldn't it be a false expectation, however, to ever expect us to not draw from the red?
Well, if there's no water in the red, I guess.
If there's no
we wouldn't
water
be
in the
drawing.
red, that sort of takes care of
But, you know,
itself.
and actually, you know, the explanation of where Fargo's intake of the Missouri River water, you know, that's very helpful, because whether it was coming all the way through and then running through the red or not, you know, that probably really answers that question. So it's my belief then that it releases us from any particular need to participate.
Well, we
as
currently
look
are,
down the road.
we currently are officially on the board, and I think it's per
Yeah.
statute even on the North Dakota side. So again, there's no obligation right now because it's still open up in the air who wants to participate. And one of the discussions we had this week was right now there's only 13 counties covered, plus a couple of cities on the Minnesota side, but 13 counties in North Dakota. There's a couple more counties, if you think about Jamestown, for example, that is not in the current plan, but that has made it known that they would need water as well. So the question is, should the group actually expand to include everybody who has an interest in getting water from their pipeline, instead of building two pipelines? And with the CHS fertilizer plant pulling out of Jamestown, there was a plan to build a second pipe. That's dead now. So the question then becomes, could you attach or could you connect a Jamestown to that pipe? So again, at this point, there's no obligation as far as I see it, and the next step really in the process is for the organization to say, okay, who is in and who is out, and that will be a step for us to then decide whether we are in and out. And again, back to the flow. I think the natural flow of the water would be near Georgetown, isn't that where the Cheyenne would actually flow? So if you look at natural flow, the water would come from the Missouri, and whatever is left over would actually flow through Fargo, through Cheyenne, into the red at Georgetown, and then actually go all the way up to Grand Forks, because they are participating as well. So again, for us, there would be an additional way, try to figure out a way to get the water either from the Cheyenne over to Moorhead or from the water plant in Fargo to the water plant in Moorhead. Again, we have no interconnect right now at all. There's no connection at all. But we all have to look at that, and Chris and team made a great presentation on that just a couple of months ago. I think we also would have to change our filtering plan, our water plan itself, because the water itself will be different coming here. So a lot of things to think about.
I would assume there's a lot of technical issues just in moving from one watershed to the next. If putting it in the red's going to cause some issues as well.
International.
Yeah,
Do you want Chris up there?
I just have
please.
a quick comment. Another interesting component of the meeting was the pending legislation regarding waters in the United States and how
Yep.
that could possibly throw the project back into a federal status, which could really delay or cause some significant consequences for the project.
Your microphone's off.
There you go.
Which would cause a lot of consequences for the timing of the project. So there's still a lot of unknowns regarding how that legislation would impact the pipeline and the construction timeline.
Okay.
So it's a new wrinkle, I would say.
There are a lot of wrinkles in this deal. Anything further? Les?
I got an email from the National League of Cities, I don't know, about a week and a half ago, and they were looking for cities that are members to say something great about my hometown. So with Dennis's help over there, I got a photo of, it's the same one that's on our little printout here, I think. and submitted that along with 2-3 sentences that they allowed us to put in there. And they're going to do some promotions, including Instagram and some other social media promotions of our hometown.
Wonderful, thank you. Bill, anything to report?
Just one thing, there was a couple of commissioners that asked about the city's art committee painting utility boxes, and that's how they said it in their email, and there's going to be a painting this Saturday, I believe it's Saturday morning, and it's right down here at the Center Mall. It's not a Moorhead Public Service utility box, it's actually the utility box that used to run the fountain in the front part of the mall, right at the corner of 5th Street and Center Avenue. And they're going to have a local artist actually do, you know, I don't know if they call it graffiti painting, but it's someone that does that type of painting, but is very good at it. And they're going to paint one of these utility boxes. And in the future, I'm sure there'll be some discussion about painting Moorhead Public Service utility boxes, but I have talked with the city, and they will talk to us before they paint any of our utility boxes. So I think that's this. You got the email, but there is an interesting video that I saw from the city, and if you just Googled or I guess gone to YouTube and looked at it, it's under Prairie Musicians 2015, and he did some work for Prairie Public Television, and it's a 3-minute, 5-minute, whatever. Little YouTube video about how he paints, and it really is interesting. He does a really nice job. So I guess he works at Eventide. I don't know his name, but he works at Eventide. He's a local person here, so artist. So anyway, that's just a little bit of an update.
Thank you. John?
Just, Bill, as far as just looking over the financials here, seeing a decrease in our reserve dollars, can you report or at least bring us up to date next meeting as far as our day reserves, as far as how we're at comparing to what our goals are?
We sure can, you bet. And the Budget Committee will be looking at that as well. And yeah, we have used some reserves to fund projects this year, and our sales are down a little bit this year, and expenses up a bit with the power plant demolition and that type of thing. So there's some things that the Budget Committee will be discussing, but actually at the next meeting, I think we have our first Budget Committee, or our first budget discussion.
Report?
With we'll do it like we've done in past years where we have report number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This will be report number 1, and we'll make sure and include a good section about reserves.
Okay. Brings us to item 10, which is to approve the agreement for professional services to complete the MNE LAP approved laboratory audit. Chris?
Chris Knudsen, Water Division Manager. So this is for professional services related to accreditation of our laboratory. Our laboratory is certified to test both coliform and E. coli bacteria in our water, and the Minnesota Department of Health requires that we test for that on an ongoing basis. But as part of that testing capability, we have to be audited by a third-party auditor. The Minnesota Department of Health used to actually provide this service, but they neglected to do that anymore, so we have to go out and get a private consultant to do this work. It's a little bit less than $3,000 worth of professional service.
Any discussion, any questions? I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's those against, please notify, or please signify by the same sign. That passes. Item 11. Approve the grant application to MDH for televising of the Moorhead Aquifer Well 6B. And we're just moving right along, David. Just work with me here.
No.
No. For those of you at home, I'm getting old, okay? Item 11. Who's talking to this one?
While you're making it,
That wasn't in the form of the motion, I don't think.
I did talk to one of our residents last week, and one of the things this resident told me was that it certainly appears from watching the 5 of you on TV that you get along with each other, And even though you may not agree on everything, it does not appear to be any animosity among the group. Oh, really?
Really?
Really? That's
Have you
what
met
this
Ralph?
person said, and I know all you guys, but we got somebody confused.
Pretty well. Yeah.
Well, the other thing that I heard, Les, and I know you heard it too, is make sure you talk into your microphones.
Yes.
You know, because they want to hear you. So, I mean, make sure you're talking and,
Okay, I need to make a little clarification right now. I do not like Ken Norman.
And as parliamentarian, I believe this whole conversation is out of order.
Yeah. Thank you. And that was not in the form of a
That
motion.
was a
Okay.
statement of fact.
Could we go to item 11, Chris?
We may. So for the past several years, Moorhead Public Service has been fortunate to receive grants from the Minnesota Department of Health for doing well protection work. So we've probably received probably a little less than $100,000 worth of grants that have gone directly toward protecting our well pumping facilities on both the Buffalo Aquifer and the Moorhead Aquifer. We've primarily focused our efforts on the Buffalo Aquifer because it's a more vulnerable aquifer, just based on the sediments around our well pumping sites. So we've actually, over the past couple of years, televised all of those wells in particular, and now we're moving to the Moorhead Aquifer. The Moorhead Aquifer is just west of Buffalo Wild Wings, right next to our water treatment plant in Moorhead. So we'll be dropping a camera down the well to make sure that the casing of the well is intact, and just to make sure that there's no prevention possibility for infiltrating into the
Do we draw anything out of that well?
We do. It's probably less than 5% of the total water we use over an annual basis.
Is it still recharging?
It's still recharging. We use, I believe it's about 150 million gallons a year out of that aquifer, and the levels in the aquifer just stay constant over the years. So it's a sustainable use of that aquifer. It's very old water, and we use it primarily in the fall and early spring. We've had to change our regimen of using it. We used to use a lot in the summer. We can't do that anymore because it has some disinfection byproduct precursors in it that we can't use.
When you refer to old water, what do you mean by that? Explain that to our people at home.
It's glacial water, so they.
Thank you.
It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years old.
Okay.
So it's very old water.
So it does predate me.
Slightly.
well, tell them how you know that it's
Yes,
old
that's
water.
what I wanted you to tell.
So they actually can determine the age of water based on tritium levels. The tritium is a byproduct of the hydrogen bomb exploding. You get isotopes of tritium, and if water infiltrates fast, that tritium will go through the layers of sediment and be infiltrated into the well. You'll pump it out, and you'll be able to see the tritium levels.
So effectively, it's less radioactive than the water that's going down there today.
You could say that.
Okay.
So what you're saying is the water that we're pulling out has never been exposed to the surface since the nuclear bomb, right?
That's
Is that right?
correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
As opposed to the Buffalo Aquifer, where water ages are probably 15 to 20 years old,
Yep.
which is newer, a lot newer.
One of those interesting little facts you learn sitting on this
I know.
board.
I've been saying all along, that's something we should sell, because that's cool stuff, right?
Could I have a motion, please, with regard to this
I move to approve item
11?
11.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, gentlemen. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed, the same sign. That's one for you, David. Item 12 is to approve specifications and authorize advertisements for bids for the I-94 and 12th Street South Water Main Relocation Project. Is this the same thing we talked about just recently?
Yeah, we've talked about this for, I think, a couple meetings in a row now. I believe 2 meetings ago, we brought you a grant agreement with the Minnesota Department of Transportation, whereby the DOT would actually reimburse MPS for the construction costs associated with this project. And we have an estimate of about $260,000 worth of cost for this particular project, which MnDOT would be reimbursing. So we're hoping to get this project going, and just a quick recap of what the project is. Basically, the new diverging diamond interchange in Moorhead will take some of the cover above the water main off. which would potentially expose that water main to freezing, and it's a critical water main for Moorhead. So we proposed going much deeper for the new water main. It'll be about 13 feet deep, and we'll actually have to extend the water main casing quite a bit underneath the interstate to make sure that if there was a water main break in the line, that it would not expose the interstate to any
How
significant
long would
danger.
our portion of that project take, do you think?
In terms of construction, or we're on the timeline we have from probably November to June of 2016. So November 5th, we want to get it out the door as soon as we can so that they can actually put the casing in this year, and then they'll come back and put the water main in probably early next year. So-
Okay. Could I have a motion, please, concerning item 12?
One quick question, if I may.
Feel free. Yes, you may.
One quick question. Is this the project that you mentioned a couple weeks ago that, you know, we needed to ask for enough?
Yes.
So that we didn't come up short?
And I'm assuming that the estimates will actually be more fine-tuned once we get the specifications and so forth back.
It's still around $260,000.
Okay.
That's what we proposed
So
in the
we're good
agreement.
with the number?
Yep. We had a preliminary design laid out when we had the agreement. We just kind of had some ideas as to what it would look like, and so I'm comfortable with the same number in
Yeah.
terms of
Okay.
the reimbursement request and the total construction cost.
I think Ralph has a question before we go further as well.
Yeah, and this is asbestos concrete, right?
That's correct.
I'm going to leave the old stuff just in there. We're not going to pull it out.
It'll be left. It'll be filled with a flowable fill material.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. If I could now go back to item 12, please, could I have a motion?
I move approval.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the same sign. I understand, by way of rumor at least, so we're going into closed session. So I'll read this. The meeting will now go into closed.
Mr. Chair, we could do item 14, and then there is no action. We don't expect action on the closed session, so then we could be done with the meeting.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And the reason I'd like to decline your kind offer is that I'll be leaving early from this
okay.
meeting, so I'd like to be here for the closed session.
Okay.
If that's okay with everybody else. And you can go to strategic planning after that. Okay, the meeting will now be closed for an executive session as permitted by the Minnesota statute, section 13D05, subdivision 3C, to consider offers for the acquisition of property along 32nd Avenue South in West Fargo for the relocation of the 115 kV transmission line. There will be no action taken, did you just say, Bill, as a result of it?
We don't expect action.
Okay. So to that extent, could I have a motion, please, to go into closed session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are now in closed session. Thank you.
The Moorhead Public Service meeting is back in open session. We finished our closed session. Chairman Norman had to leave, so for the rest of the meeting, I get the chair. Boy, I feel powerful. What we have left on our agenda is discussion on strategic plan related to, and I'm going to let Bill start it.
New technologies. So this is, I believe, item number 4 on our list of strategic direction items that we've been kind of walking through after some of the meetings here. What we've got is actually our strategic direction number 5 in the draft strategic plan, and that's attached. We just attached goals 5.1 and 5.2. 5.1 was related to water innovations, and then 5.2 is related to electric innovations. And we've talked quite a bit about, some of the water innovations as the time has gone on. So we wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the electric innovations that are, currently being talked about within the industry, and then how they would apply locally. We've kind of looked mainly at implementing local technologies, but at the same time kind of describing what's going on nationally and regionally. There's been a lot of talk about smart grid and what is smart grid, and if you talk to Travis and Joe and I, you would know that we've been doing a lot of smart grid over the past number of years. It is picking up though, because smart grid really can be any energy related, either energy efficiency or energy production or energy distribution type technologies that help us do it better, do it cheaper, do it faster. And so a lot of our SCADA equipment has been upgraded over the past few years. We've got distribution switches that we're using. And then there's all this discussion about like meter reading type equipment, AMI, you've heard, automated metering infrastructure. And what that is, you know, smart meters that can do a variety of things, records energy use in a variety of ways. Also, you can control load with these smart meters. We have money in the budget. In fact, we've got several $1 million in the budget. The Budget Committee will take a look at that for implementation of AMI, automated meter infrastructure. There's a map or a schematic diagram, I guess you'd call it, from Tantalus. And staff has met with a number of entities that do automated meter infrastructure. I also serve on a task force with Missouri River Energy Services that's talking about smart grid. It's called the Smart Grid Committee. But right now they're spending a lot of their time looking at, you know, smart metering and that type of thing. So, and it can do a variety of things. And the problem is that it is expensive and it is developing rapidly. So you almost hate to pull the trigger quickly because something new and better is going to come out next year. And so we've been monitoring that over the past few years. Travis, Chris, Joe, Nancy, all of us could describe to you different things they would like it to do, and of course the salesman would say it can do it all. And we've been vetting that quite extensively here in the past few months. So anyway, so smart grid is just kind of a general area that we could talk about. The other general area, I think, so there's probably two general areas. Smart grid, which is just a huge area to discuss. And the other one is distributed generation. Distributed generation is a term used for a lot of the renewables and that type of thing that are being looked at. And we do have some information we passed out, information Dennis put on the tables up here, because one thing we should give you an update on is our Capture the Sun program, because we're one of the first entities, especially municipal utilities in the state of Minnesota, to do a community solar project. Just to give you an update, we will be having an open house on October 6th, Tuesday, October 6th, at 5 o'clock, where we'll invite, you know, everyone to attend this open house. What's in front of you has all the names of people that are participating in that project, and you know, we would like all you to come to that ribbon cutting at that time. But that's distributed generation. Wind falls into that category. Solar falls into that category, a variety of solar, either community solar or on people's homes. The other thing that the commission will be looking at is, and the Budget Committee will see this next week, is what type of incentive, if any, do we give to solar. We have done that in the past. We're actually going to propose not doing the incentive on rooftop units anymore, but direct that more toward the community solar. And the Budget Committee will have a chance to take a look at that. As far as other distributed generation, there's a lot of talk about battery storage, and that is something that's developing as well. Again, its cost is the main factors when we talk about implementing these new technologies. And back to AMI again, I mean, we're kind of watching others to see how they're doing their automated meter infrastructure, because some communities like Pierre, South Dakota, I know just implemented it. Watertown, Minnesota, or Worthington, Minnesota, has implemented some things. Actually, Watertown, Brookings, Moorhead have a similar metering system, and we're all kind of watching the others. One thing that we've done in our practice here has been to keep up on our maintenance and probably the implementing of new technologies. We kind of phase that in. So some cities actually have waited until, you know, they've got losses associated with not metering properly and that type of thing. And so they have other reasons for doing a, like a full-scale change out of all their metering. And that's something that really, that opportunity escapes us because we maintain our system a bit better than that, which is good news. Now, one opportunity for a pilot project, which is listed in 5.2, is to look at Oakport, because we will be changing all the meters out in Oakport anyway, so we could actually look at an AMI pilot for that area where we really wouldn't have to send any trucks up there to read any meters. So that's something that we're looking at.
And along those lines, what about new developments southeast? Could we, with new stuff going in with the newer meters, or is this?
We do have, and this is maybe a time when Travis could come up and tell us what's coming in new, because it is different than what we got in the central part, but it's compatible, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Travis, good time to introduce Travis.
Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. So Bill discussed the deployment of a pilot study up in Oakport, and the reason to do that would be, since we're already going to be up there and swapping out all the meters, it'd be a good area to test out a new AMI-type system. Some of the companies that we've been looking at have compatibilities to where we could utilize our existing meter infrastructure and then just deploy hubs or, you know, network-type meters that'll collect all that information and send it back, so that we don't have to do a costly complete build-out or rebuild-out of the existing meter system.
How would the network devices be connected to one another?
We would have to do some type of either fiber or radio, or there could be also a cellular type situation where you send all the information back via those types of communications.
The amount of data going back and forth is minimal, right?
Very, very minimal, the amount that goes back. There are other parts of those you can also incorporate a load management or a new load management system into it. We've already have one that exists, but it'd be very similar to that type of load management.
So it'd be a combination of?
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
you could incorporate several different items into it, and pretty much most of the different companies that we've been talking to can do several different options that we're looking at or interested in down the road criteria.
Question, Dave?
Really kind of off the wall, but is there technology yet that allows the consumer to have real-time information about what their consumption is, so that instead of waiting for the bill to come at the end of the month, they can actually see what they're burning and how that compares with the same time the year before? It seems like the way we're going, that would be a very natural kind of outflow of technology for the consumer to actually be able to determine, you know, God, I'm using too much electricity this month, I better turn something off.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're all developing something like that. The one that beat them to the punch was the Nest thermostat, because you basically get that type of information on the Nest thermostat, and you know, they've just done it better, quicker than what these metering companies have done. And so you would be fighting against that technology, and I know a lot of people have that technology. I've got it, and it works pretty cool. The other thing that Nest is doing, and Google, of course, is they're working with the utility companies to do load management through the Nest, because basically what happens in the wintertime or the summertime, when we control air conditioners, we end up raising the temperature in your home by a few degrees. You know, telling the air conditioner just kind of lay back a little bit. And you can do that two-way through the Nest thermostat. And so that's a new technology that really has very, very low cost. Because what we have to do if we're going to control through our Thrifty Watts program is we have to install, a device outside the home connected to the air conditioner, and that's how we're doing it right now. But so I mean, again, it's where you kind of look before you leap, because there might be something fairly easy to use, coming down the pike right behind you. So
How often do you look at it? I seem to remember a report here about 3-4 years ago that people were not actually looking at the data on their devices.
Right, and I don't know what that study showed, but the problem is a lot of people just don't want to mess with.
Correct.
They don't care.
Right.
They really aren't interested in control, having somebody control their air conditioning or whatever.
Nor are they really, they may say they are, but, it's cold out. I wonder how much additional energy I'm using. Does it really matter? It's cold out. You're going to have heat. And they say, whatever.
Right.
I remember that from about 3, maybe 4 years ago when we had this discussion.
Yeah, consumer
before.
behavior is a big part of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you just don't know what you're going to get until you've implemented it. If it costs you a bunch of money and then it didn't work, where what we've currently have for load management, that type of thing, is where we control it. They just agree ahead of time, and then we control it when we need it, and they don't even notice that maybe the temperature went up a little bit. So that's the kind of the Nest technology and Google, that that's the kind of names that are out there right now looking at doing things. Travis mentioned load management. We've actually got a separate load management from meter reading. The one thing I wanted to mention about meter reading, which is interesting, because Travis mentioned that, and Les mentioned that there's little data out there. The meter reading is really small data, so you can collect that whenever, and once a month, not a big deal. If you're just going to read it to send out a bill. But if you're going to read it to do time of use billing, or if you're going to bill on demand, then you may need a different meter than what we're even looking at in the schematic. So there's a number of directions that are being looked at, and we are looking at it in a coordinated way with the MRES utilities as well. So there's a big debate. You'll hear it if you go to a national conference right now about the distributed generation, especially solar energy, which is causing an additional peak for the utilities. And so solar is not benefiting the utilities as much as people tend to think they are, because it's causing an additional peak. So that would beg for different types of rates in order not to unequitably punish non-participants of the program, solar. So it gets fairly deep fairly quick when you're talking about, some of the philosophies of some of these new technologies too. The utility industry is developing and implementing these at a different paces. So we're watching and kind of keeping an eye on things. We've talked about GIS before. That we get reports on, from time to time. So unless there's questions there, we won't, do really much of an update here. I don't know if Travis had anything else on your list of things to just kind of throw out there.
The one cool caveat with some of the meter reading information is we can also, there's a few things we can look at. Some of the new meters on the water side can also detect leaks and stuff like that ahead of, or earlier as well. And there's outage notification too that we could get off the meters as well if it loses power or power shut off, stuff like that. So those are other interesting things which would come into an outage management type system or allow us to get a little bit more reliable faster. GIS stuff, that's going to be, it's kind of the GIS, I think, what is it called here? The computerized maintenance management. It's kind of one of the last things on on the master plan, the GIS master plan. And that would be something where we'd have to do a, a comprehensive review of, internal workflows and softwares and trying to make sure everything's compatible to make sure that everybody can input and pull information out of it as much as possible. So that'd be something down the line that we'll be also looking at as well.
The outage management, that's an interesting one because people would just kind of think that we know where the outage is when the power is out. And really, right now, we know the region of town that it's in, but we really don't know the, what specifically went out. So we really do rely on the old technology of radios and trucks out in the field looking for where the outage might be, and then people calling in, and they do call in, saying my power is out. Do you know my power is out? And that actually does help. With an outage management system, the meter would know the power isn't on me anymore, so it would send a signal back saying, I'm out. And your map would show specifically what is out. We haven't implemented something like that yet.
If there's no electrical power in the house, how's the device going to talk to?
Well, I guess I said that wrong, because it just won't be talking
Thank you.
anymore. It won't
Okay.
talk anymore, so
Yeah, it
it'll
won't
go.
tell you that there's a problem.
It'll
It'll
go
just
black.
go offline.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't-
it gives basically what's called is like a last gasp. It has a
Yeah.
capacitor within the meter that'll allow it to say, hey, I've lost AC power, so,
Yeah,
outage.
yeah.
Questions, Ralph?
Yeah, what's the price difference between a standard meter and if we wanted to do an Oakport pilot? Is there a big price difference between the two?
Yeah, do you remember, Joe? Yeah, it's about, I think regular meters are about $60. It'd be about 120 or
Okay.
a little bit more than that for a different meter.
Well, and you'd have to justify that based on not having to roll trucks out there.
Sure. Yeah.
And you would need some kind of a base system to collect the information.
Correct, yeah.
So,
So we'd have to,
But like you
They've
said,
got
I mean, having an opportunity like Oakport where we need to change things anyway could be a good opportunity for us to get our feet wet and say, yeah, we're going to spend a little bit more money on those meters. But again, it's a long way out to Oakport anyway. Talking about the trucks here, that could be a good way for us to go forward and say, let's try it.
yeah, it's a densely treated area, so it would be a good area to try it, to make sure communications work.
More questions?
the only other area that I'd probably bring up under new technology, because I'm really talking about things that we're doing locally here, but if I expanded to some of the things that Missouri River Energy Services is looking at, like I said, I'm on that task force that's looking at smart grids, so they're at least looking at things together so we can kind of all learn together what's going on out there. But solar, MRES is looking at doing a 0.5 megawatt solar installation. So a large utility scale solar installation. Right now it looks like Pierre, South Dakota would be where they would place that. And just to give you some relative size, ours is 40 kW. So 40 kW versus 500 kW. So it's 12 times the size of our installation. And, you know, the issue they're looking at is how fast do we do these? Which cities do we put them in? Do we put them in, you know, because cities want to see the new technology in their community? Or do we put them in purely for economics? And they're not required, they're not mandated right now to do it. The investor-owned utilities in Minnesota are required to do it, but since we're a public power municipal utility, they're not required to do it. So should we be doing it, number one? And then if we do it, do we do it in one location or do we do it distributed across the membership? So they're debating those things. I think, John, you had a question? Oh, okay. Yeah, so anyway, that's, you know, and that would be, I don't know if I'm going to have the number right. What would be, it'd be about 10 times or 12 times the size of ours. So I'm thinking ours was around 100. So that would be, you know, a $1.2 million installation that they're looking at. And, you know, I'm arguing, number one, should we even do it or should we just wait? Because, you know, if you're going to put it in Pierre, South Dakota, people from Moorhead aren't going to see it. You know, and if you're not required to do it, why are we doing it now? Because prices are going down. So, It's an interesting discussion at that level. The other thing they're looking at, just an interesting one, new technology, is pump storage. It's not a new technology, but it's new, probably new for us. They would actually pump water up into a pool in one of the buttes down in around Council Bluff, Iowa, and then let the water flow down through a generator, pump it up at night, generate electricity during the peak, and there's an economy there, and it's a huge area, and many utilities are looking at this together because it's close to $1 billion project. So yeah.
Questions?
Bill did talk about energy saving stuff. We will be doing a energy savings project. We're going to relocate all of our town gate, or the 3 town gate meters that we currently have in our DOE and our Fargo substation, and we're going to actually be putting them on the low side of the transformer so we reduce our transmission losses in town. Estimated cost for the project is about $200,000, and the payback is about 2 to 3 years. So it's a good opportunity for us.
Yeah, and that was, Travis and his engineers and other engineers recognizing that opportunity, because this all came about because we're going into SPP.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and it basically is just where you're going to meter it, on the high side of a transformer versus the low side of the transformer, so we can get them to pay for the losses instead of us through the transformer. And they allow it, so we're going to do it,
Yep. So we'll be bringing a task change order to you in the future here with DGR to take care of that.
Anyway, that's kind of a broad brush of things. I mean, if there's other things that you think of, we do talk about these from time to time, at the commission meetings, but this is item number 5, investigate innovative technologies. We just kind of leave it on there, and then we discuss them as we go.
Comments, questions? Travis, anything more?
I'm good.
City council member? Okay. Yes, John?
Are you about to adjourn?
I'm getting there.
Just, I guess, a couple.
Comments for the good of the order.
Just a couple of comments here. As far as attending or upcoming meetings, I think here the employee meeting on October 9th, normally a lot of commissioners attend. I will not be able to be there. Also, next meeting, October 13th, I will not be here as well. So just a reminder, it'd be good to have as many of us at those as possible. But then also, I had a chance to visit with John Bolger just briefly here about the letter from Randy Stephenson. And then that's still being worked on, so I don't know if that's still at your desk, Bill, or if it's at John's, but we should keep that on the agenda as well.
Yep. We're still working on, land issues with the city council, and I think that's coming along, and I think that would answer that question if we can work something out. And I know John is trying to talk to the city attorney about those things. I'm not sure what that status is, but
He just noted that there's some, he didn't say clouded title, but some interesting descriptor on the deed as far as who the actual owners of the property. So there's just some clarification that has to be, I would envision it at there's titles that are clouded, so that has to be resolved before there can be a transfer.
yeah.
Thank you, John. Next meeting, October 23rd, following meeting, October 27th. Public Power Week, the 4th through the 11th of October. Our ribbon cutting on October 6th, 5:30 p.m. And anything else for the good of the order?
There's a meeting tomorrow night, just in case anybody forgot. Ralph and I are going to attend that.
Oh, you're going to DL?
Into Detroit Lakes,
Okay.
yep. So, and that's with Missouri River Energy Services. They'll do an update on a number of things.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. They do that, what, about every 3 years? 2, 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else for the good of the order?
Nope.
The meeting is adjourned.